Hello and welcome to Table Talk. I'm your host, Karen Wilson, and we have an inspirational show for you today. My guest is Mr. Mike Droese, who is a former professional wrestler. And Mike started, I'm going to give you a little bit of his bio. He was kind of the funny kid in school, going around liking attention, you know, the class comedian. Went through high school though and found that you had an interest in wrestling and joined the wrestling team. Also became through that a professional wrestler when wrestling, of course, it's still huge, but especially in the heyday of the 80s, 80s and 90s, became a professional wrestler. After your career in wrestling, or even during that, that brought some ups and downs in your life, and we're going to talk about how you've overcome those things, and now you help others fight addiction that are going through the court system. So I welcome you to the show, Mike.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you've got such a great story. There is a ton of content out there about you, so it took me a while to research you.
There's a bit out there, that's for sure.
Yeah, and you still make content yourself, and we'll talk about your podcast and video podcast as we get going. Let's talk about, or tell the audience how you got started in wrestling and your path in joining the World Wrestling Federation.
Well, I was always a wrestling fan. Growing up in Miami, Florida, I used to watch championship wrestling from Florida with Gordon Soley, and had the likes of Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair and all those famous wrestlers coming through there all the time. And I was always interested in wrestling, but I know the actual moment where I said out loud that I wanted to be a pro wrestler was WrestleMania 1, the first WrestleMania that Vince McMahon put on with the World Wrestling Federation. Me and my dad went down to a local arena, and we watched it on closed circuit television because there was no pay-per-view then. This is like 1984. And just watching the Hulk Hogan and Mr. T match with Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff, it was something like I'd never seen. And that was the moment, I remember it vividly. I stood up and looked at my dad and said, I want to be a professional wrestler. And from that point on, I just really worked hard at it. And while still in high school, I found out where there was a school to learn how to be a pro wrestler with a wrestling ring in it, and started learning.
Mm-hmm. And your dad, he said in your story that I was listening to online, he really helped you, I guess, go out and find at these events how to become a professional, talk to people on your behalf, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, because I was still in high school, and when we actually had the wrestlers from Florida come and do a fundraiser in our gym for our wrestling team at the school, which I was on the wrestling team. And I was too afraid to go in the locker room and ask if there was a school somewhere. But my dad went in there and he talked everybody's ears off and asked and found where there was a local school down in Miami. And that's how everything got started. But yeah, he was always very supportive and instrumental in a lot of the things I did, especially with athletics growing up. Mm-hmm. Always been a great support. So mm-hmm. Yes.
Great. So your name that you went by professionally, we'll talk about all your names, but Duke the Dumpster was kind of the one you were most famous for. Is that correct?
Correct. That was in the World Wrestling Federation. And interestingly enough, after I trained in Florida and started wrestling the independent circuit in Florida while I was going to college at the University of Miami, I was doing wrestling shows part-time on the side to gain experience. And I knew Vince McMahon would be looking for a special type of character because he had all the kind of funny characters, and he really loved blue-collar workers as good guys. And I really thought a lot about it, and I had this great name that one of my fraternity buddies had given me, Rocco Gibraltar. And I thought that was the coolest name. And I just had to put a character with it. And I was just brainstorming one day, and I said, what would go good with Rocco Gibraltar? And I thought the G-Man, Rocco Gibraltar. And then I just had to figure out what the G-Man was. Was it going to be a G-Man, like an old school, like FBI agent? Or could it be the G-Man, like the garbage man? And as soon as I said the garbage man, Rocco Gibraltar, that was it. Boom. That was the first time I'd put that character together. And the funny thing is, the coveralls, the weight belt, the gloves I was wearing, and the trash can, all of that was exactly the same as I did it in Florida. And I had a ready-made character for Vince McMahon. And when I went up there, when they hired me, I went and did what's called vignettes. You know, this is Duke the Dumpster coming soon. And before we did it, his son Shane McMahon was actually producing my vignettes, and he told me they had come up with the name Duke the Dumpster Droese for me to use there because, of course, they wanted to own it in terms of licensing and things like that. So they came up with that name, but nothing else about the character changed from the Florida days. It was exactly the same. It was a garbage man, blue-collar worker, you know, big baby face, good guy. Not really baby face, but...
Well, at the time, you looked like you were quite a bit, probably
lot
in your
younger.
early 20s. So,
I
yeah,
was.
still had that going on.
Yes.
Lots of interesting things as far as people goes and all of that. How did they come up with their stage names? And what was it like, I guess, more importantly, for you to develop your character and to turn that on as far as, did that come natural for you? Because we talked about how in school you kind of had that natural showmanship.
I was always goofy in school. That's a good way to put it. I was a pain in the neck. That's what the teachers used to call me. Very hyperactive, actually. ADHD before they called it that. But, you know, you either have that or you don't when you walk out through those curtains. Either you turn it on or you don't. And if you don't, you won't last very long. I know their creative process was always interesting to me. It seemed like they had a bunch of ideas and names laying around, and anytime a new wrestler would come into the territory, they would try to put some of these ideas on that person to see if they worked. And a lot of times they would not work, and they would kind of figure things out, or they wouldn't. But as far as, yes, making something happen, I was at an advantage over most people because, like I said, I walked in the door having already used this character, Duke the Dumpster, as another name, but still a garbage man, in Florida for a better part of a year and a half, 2 years. So I was developing it for 2 years before I even went there. So it was easy on me.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure, like you said, it's probably an evolution as to who the character turns into. One of the fun things I think that we've learned about wrestling is who starts out as a good character can sometimes become the bad guy for a while, and that's very interesting, I think.
Yeah, they had plans at different times to turn me into a bad guy, but it never kind of came to fruition. Unfortunately, I say, because I think it's always a lot more fun to be a bad guy. It's easier to make people not like you than to make people like you. But I was a good guy for so long. It was really about time. And when we really started talking about it, it just didn't happen for a long time. I think Vince really wouldn't pull the trigger on it because he wanted to keep me that blue collar good guy for a bit longer. But for whatever reason, we had talked about it, but it just never really happened.
Well, I was watching a video clip before you came, and it surprised me. I can remember when I was young watching Jerry Lawler, and he was the good guy. But then this particular clip, he had gone rogue, and he was turning in, and you had a part of that clip in the fact that he was kind of, you were starting a feud, and of course his name is just iconic with wrestling. What was it like wrestling with all of these great names, and you were a part of those great names?
It was absolutely amazing, and that was the very first issue I got into when I walked in the door, was Jerry the King Lawler. And yeah, Jerry the King Lawler is literally like a king here in Tennessee, a big baby face, a good guy. People loved him, but it was so interesting how he would just go up to New York and work for Vince McMahon, mainly on commentary, but he would wrestle some, but he would turn bad over there, and people hated him there. And he made my job very easy. The people they hated him so much that I didn't hardly have to do anything when I walked out there. And it was always great to wrestle him, and I gained a lot of knowledge and experience from Jerry Lawler. And we just had a good time. It was a lot of fun. working that old school Tennessee Southern style of wrestling with him, even up there in the WWF. It was a blast.
Yeah, I think the one that aired here was the Memphis, I believe, just off of my, 18, 17-year-old memory and stuff. And it come on Saturday afternoons, and that's where a lot of people locally just heard Dusty Rhodes and some of the icons, the old school guys. This was
People
probably
always
even
talk
before
about
Hulk Hogan.
Tojo Yamamoto
Yes.
and Jackie Fargo and all those names were iconic coming through Tennessee constantly. So, yeah, there was a lot of big names that came through here in Tennessee.
Yeah, that was a fun thing to introduce a lot of locals here into wrestling. So let's transition, I guess, out of the wrestling career that came to an end, because there's only so many years, I guess, people can do that. I guess what was the most difficult thing in transitioning from this wrestling persona into an everyday person, back into the real world again, or the 9 to 5? What was that transition like?
Well, it was quite a while before I went back to being a 9 to 5 person. I'll say that first. And there was two major reasons as far as leaving wrestling. One, and I know we're going to talk more about this, is I had developed a drug problem when I was in wrestling, because to make it through, I tell people that wrestling is a lot like being in a car accident on a nightly basis, and it is. And one of the feuds I had was with a guy named Triple H, and we wrestled a lot of house shows together, non-televised shows, and we were getting ready for a pay-per-view, and we were doing this move we had done every night 50 times before that. And then on this particular night in New Jersey, in the Meadowlands Arena, I went, and he threw me up in the air, out of the ring, over the top rope, and you have to catch the rope as you go over to break your fall and fall more softly, if there's such a thing on the concrete. I missed the rope. So I went probably about a good 15-foot drop right to my rear end on the seated position on the concrete floor, and just completely crushed the lower part of my spine up pretty bad. And in fact, I couldn't move for about 3 seconds. But after that, I started taking painkillers. So I had developed that issue. And then on top of that, and people don't realize this, is walking out those curtains every night and having people cheer you is a drug in and of itself. And when it's all of a sudden gone, that can wreak havoc on individuals psychologically. It can mess you up mentally if you're not prepared. And I wasn't prepared when I left. Like I said, I had already developed issues with the painkillers and the drugs, and I was already weakened in that state mentally. But when it ended pretty quickly. And I went home, and I didn't have a job or anything like that. I didn't have a family. I didn't have a wife and kids or anything to go back to. So it kind of got worse. It spiraled out of control. But the hard things were the drug use, and leaving that business all of a sudden is just such a shock, because you're so used to people, the people cheering for you and having that feeling. So those were tough.
Yeah, as you said, that's probably an addictive. Everybody likes the pat on the back and the chanting and the love and everything, and to have that gone now, it's hard to fill that void. Like you said, no wife back at home yet,
Right.
No kids or anything like that. So that's a tough transition. And I'll go back to this a little bit. As far as the business goes, what do you think is the hardest thing about being in the business, maybe maintaining that? What is the toughest thing about that? Is it the physical part of it? Is it the things that go behind your back, the deals and that type stuff? Maybe you're not in control of your own career.
A lot of that stuff is very difficult. Yes, the physical wear and tear, and back then the road schedule was crazy. It was like 300 days a year we were on the road, at least. But I will say this: it's professional wrestling is part of the entertainment industry, and in the entertainment industry, you have to be able to handle a certain amount of rejection in different forms. And when you are promised something from a promoter and it doesn't work out, and they go a different direction and they don't do what they promised you, you've got to be able to handle that a certain way. You can't let it get to you. And in that sense, I was immature as far as the business. And it affected me more than it should have. And that's when I kind of started to dislike the business. And it wasn't long after that where I left. But that was a big thing, is just handling the business aspect of it, knowing how to handle yourself in terms of promoters and dealing with the different types of rejection and things that happen, because it happens to everybody. Just some people are better suited to deal with it if they know what they're doing. And it was very difficult. It was very difficult. So yeah.
Well, I would think, being wise to the business when you're in your 20s, that's tough to do. And then you can fully understand with the physical aspect of it, and then the emotional aspect at times of being beat down and things like that, how the drug use actually started. And I mean, we're talking about the entertainment industry where it's prevalent anyway.
Sure. Yeah, it was, guys were taking things just to get by because the day-to-day pain was sometimes on bad. And that's just talking about the minor injuries, not like every so often you get something pretty serious. And there's like an unwritten rule that if you took yourself out of the game, then you would lose your spot. So if you got hurt, you didn't want to take yourself off the road because you could potentially lose any position you had and whatever angle you were working or feud you were in. So yeah, in that respect, it was very difficult. And I came out of nowhere. I was working down in Florida on a part-time basis when I was going to college. A lot of these guys worked all over the world and all over the country before they went to work for Vince McMahon. So they had a very good knowledge of the politics and how to do the business part and working with promoters that I did not have. And that was probably the biggest downfall as far as that, is I didn't understand the business side of it as well as many others because I came basically out of nowhere. So yeah, that was rough. It was tough to deal with.
Yeah. And so as you transitioned out, I know you had some jobs that, kind of filled the gap and things. And at some point, you decided to go back to school. What led you to do that and become a teacher?
Well, the first time I went to rehab, my family moved me up to Tennessee, here to Middleton, to McMinnville. And I went to rehab at Vanderbilt and got over all of that mess and decided I need to refocus. And my second choice, other than professional wrestling, was to be a teacher. Because when I grew up, as I said before, I really did have ADHD growing up, and it presented many learning disabilities for me. I didn't really learn basic reading until 4th grade. My parents really had to work hard and spend a lot of money they did not have to get me extra help. But when I decided I wanted to become a teacher, it was with the interest of helping kids, giving kids some of the help that I didn't have when I was growing up. And I really understood how that, the mind works on a child with learning disabilities because I grew up with that. And I was good at it. I was really good at it for a number of years. Yeah.
And then, as you began teaching and of course you're working out and things like that, the old habit of addiction comes back again. Talk to us about how that became a problem again for a second time.
Interestingly, that first time I got clean, it was in the end of 02, 03, beginning of 03, and I just stayed clean for a number of years up until 2009. I just stayed clean. I just said, I'm not going to use drugs, and I'm going to get my life back. But honestly, that's really not the correct way to do it. You've got to really work on recovery. It's not just about being clean and sober. You got to change the way you think and a lot of things. And when I was a teacher, I was also a coach, and I would coach in the weight rooms at the middle school and the high school, training kids, strength and conditioning coach. And I remember one year, me and another coach decided to start working out in the high school weight room to show the football players how to do it and lead by example. So we get in there and I start lifting weights like I'm an 18-year-old kid again. And old wrestling injuries just kind of started kicking in. And I had a really bad foot injury, my left foot. And I'm doing jump training like plyometrics and squatting like 400 or 500 pounds, all kinds of crazy nonsense. And the foot collapsed. And that was when I made the fateful decision to ask a friend if they could get me some painkillers, because I thought I would be okay, which is a big mistake a lot of drug addicts make, is they think they can go back and control it the next time. And I couldn't. And it jumped on me really fast. And yeah, the next thing I know, I was at it full blast. I was more concerned with getting drugs than getting my foot fixed properly. And it turned into a major issue. And by 2013, I ended up having to have the left foot amputated after two surgeries and a nasty staph infection deep inside the foot. The decision was made to take the foot and get a prosthetic leg below the calf, below the knee. And, you know, by that point, though, I was on so many drugs that it wasn't a difficult decision. I mean, the way it was given to me was the doctor could have tried to clean up the foot, and he would have, you know, cleaned out the infection the best he could, but no guarantees. And I would have had no mobility in it. Or if we took the foot, he said, if I got fit with a good prosthetic, I'd be out of pain. Those are the three words that got me. Out of pain the quickest, because those 2 years prior to that, the pain that I had endured, even being on drugs, the pain that I had endured was unbelievable. So I wanted to be out of pain. And so I went ahead and had the foot amputation. And 2013 was an interesting year. Not only the amputation, but that was also at the same time, about a month and a half after was when I got arrested, because doing all the stuff with the drugs, I had graduated to being an IV drug user. I was, you know, shooting drugs and barely keeping it together as a teacher by day, but by night running around with all these people I shouldn't have and got myself into trouble. And that's when it all came crashing down. September 13th, Friday the 13th, 2013, at 3 p.m. exactly.
Wow, that's a lot of threes in there.
Yeah, Jody Kavanaugh and Tony Jenkins were at my back door, knocking on the door, and they had a warrant for my arrest. And that was the day that changed everything. I always say that was the worst day of my life and the best day of my life at the same time, because that was the end of the insanity. I knew I had to change now because the teaching career was gone. So in essence, I had already lost two major careers, a wrestling career and a teaching career.
And you worked really hard for both of those.
Very hard. And that's what drugs do. They will take everything from you over and over and over again. And I knew that once I got physically clean this time, I was willing to do whatever it took to stay clean. And a big part of that now is working with other people. And that is very helpful to me. And it's working a program of recovery every day. Instead of just staying clean, I've got to do something to maintain my recovery every day. And a large part of that is helping other people.
And you have a podcast called Road to Recovery. Talk to us about the podcast, what you do on it, what it's about, and its purpose.
Well, I've got a podcast called The Road to Recovery with Duke the Dumpster Droese, and you know, it's a passion project of mine. I really wanted to get out on the airwaves and try to help people on a much larger scale with addiction issues and things of that nature, because I know there's a lot of people struggling out there, and I know how bad it's been, and people always need support. And sometimes I think people really respect when somebody they really liked as a actor or a wrestler or something comes out and says that they had the same types of issues. And it makes those people realize that they can talk about their problems and they can get help too. So that's kind of where it came from. And we do that on Fridays, on Friday evenings at 5 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Facebook. And it's on Facebook Live, so it's free. But again, that was something that came out of the teaching and stuff that I do here locally for the drug court program as well, which, yeah, the drug court.
And that's your vocation now. You work with people on a daily basis with addiction issues, and that's, I guess, a way of paying it forward as far as you've overcome these things and you want to help others try to do the same thing.
Yes, 100%. And it's interesting. As part of my plea deal, when I had gotten in trouble, I took the drug court program here. They call it the Adult Recovery Court program. And Brad Price and the people in the drug court gave me an opportunity, and I ran with it. Like I said, I was willing to do anything. So whatever rules they had or whatever house arrest I had to do, none of that mattered. I was willing to do all of it. And I did so well that when I finished the program, they asked me to work for them. And I do work there now in the capacity of being a case manager, and also I facilitate treatment classes. I teach classes like relapse prevention and recovery skills, just trying to give folks the tools they need when they get out of supervision to be able to walk out in life on their own and handle situations that might lead them to going back to using drugs. But in this case, giving them options and alternatives so they don't have to keep going back to that lifestyle and continuously going in and out of jail on that vicious cycle. We're trying to just change the way people think and give them, like I said, the tools they need, because it's a miserable existence and it's not going away. There's more addicts being created every day, unfortunately, with all these drugs out there. And it's getting more dangerous out there with the drugs, just fentanyl that's out there, and they're mixing it in everything, and people are dying left and right. So it's a scary proposition to be addicted in this day and age. So any help you can get or offer is a good thing, I believe.
And what is your, I guess, counseling approach when you're working with these people? Are you the tough guy? Are you the softy? Or what is your counseling style?
I'm the no-nonsense guy. Sometimes that comes off as tough, but it's tough love. If I raise my voice, everybody knows it's for a reason. I don't just yell at people or anything. I come from a viewpoint of mutual respect. I think everybody deserves respect if they give respect. And people that work with me and come to the classes that I teach, they learn that very quickly. I am definitely not a pushover. But I will also, I've always told them, I will do anything in my power to help you with your problem. And I will always advocate for you in the drug court program and in the courts, but I will never lie for you, ever. And they learned that pretty quickly, that I'm very serious about that. And I'm very serious about recovery. We have fun in my classes and we joke around and stuff too, but it doesn't have to be, all serious all the time. You can have fun in your life and even laugh at yourself, but when it comes to recovery, I'm very serious, because it's a life or death situation, and people are dying every day out there, and I want to try to help save as many people as I can, because it's such a miserable existence, a sad, lonely, dark existence, and we do everything we can on a daily basis to try and help people break free of that. Yep.
Yeah. A lot to take in with that. Gives me thinking about, you talked about, you'll do anything but lie for them.
Yep.
And lying is such a big part, I guess, of the persona that you have to have in this when you're addicted. And it's almost like at times they're not honest. They live in an alternate reality sometimes. And that's a hard habit to break for people like that, is not to have your cover story or your excuse or whatever. So that's I'm sure a big part of treatment.
100%. It's very difficult to break that part of the cycle. There are many forms of denial, and people go through them constantly. Even after getting clean and sober, there's still that first intuition to lie in situations. I was catching myself telling little lies after I'd gotten clean and sober, and not understanding why I was doing it. It's a hard habit to break. And sometimes when people start to get into maybe a little bit of trouble again, they start off in that lying process. And as I always like to say, they will try to ride that lie to the bitter end. And we try to break that cycle. We try to break them free of that type of thinking, and just show them how to step up and be honest. And our program especially is such a program of honesty. If somebody messes up and has a difficult time and they truly come to us and say, I messed up, and they ask for help, we won't put them in jail. We're not just putting people in jail, when they mess up. It doesn't work like that. People get an opportunity. We'll always try to find ways to help as long as people are honest. We really push that part of the program, is honesty. And that's the way it should be in life as well. And that's something we teach. Because it is so important. But yes, that is one of the most difficult habits to break, is the lying and all the different types of denial that people are still hung up in, even getting clean and sober after being addicted for so long.
Yeah, and they're afraid to disappoint people, and they know the honesty brings some disappointment, but so much better just to be straight and just say, hey, I messed up, you know.
And work your way through the issues and then rebuild that trust again, because that's one of the most powerful things you can ever regain is trust from people you never thought would trust you again.
Awesome. Well, you're, big buff guy here, and had lots of, I guess, experience with working out and things like that over the years. Is that part of kind of what keeps you motivated? I know you help others and you do some personal training and things like that. How does that play a role in your life now, and does it play a role in your sobriety?
Working out has played a major role in my recovery, absolutely. Now I just went through an issue with my prosthetic leg last year, so I was kind of out of the gym for a while, and I'm just getting back into it. But I will say this about the gym for me. That is my place of meditation. When I get in the gym and I get real serious and I'm training, working out, doing cardio, whatever it may be, and I get in that zone, that, in recovery, they talk a lot about meditation. And I was never comfortable just sitting there trying to be quiet and meditate. But in the gym, I find this zone, this thing comes over me, and I'm in that zone where all of a sudden I'm thinking about not just the workout, but also things that are going on in my life, and I'm working through problems and situations that maybe I didn't feel like I had time to think about during the regular course of the day. So for me, that's what the gym is. It's a place for me to go and kind of just tune everything and everybody out and focus on working myself out physically, but also mentally, because I can think through the day's problems and figure out solutions and figure out what I want to do next.
Kind of process the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sometimes the day gets a hold of us and we can't really process it till later on.
Yeah, we get too wrapped up in it, and we got to find that moment to take ourselves out of the emotions of the day so we can really think about how we're going to process it and deal with it and figure things out and find solutions and come back the next day and, improve.
Yeah, well, that's what life is about. We try to strive to be the best we can be, and sometimes we fail, and that's okay too. We just got to pick back up and start all over again. And your story is super inspirational. We appreciate. I did not know you lived here locally, and we had such a neat person here helping out with so many issues that we face in small town America and all over the United States and the world with addiction.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. I really do appreciate that, and I really appreciate you having me on the show. It's been a great time.
Yeah, well, great. Well, you can tune in to Facebook Live every Friday night, you said?
Fridays at 5 p.m. You can just go to my Facebook page, Mike Droese, and you'll see it. It pops right up live, and my Facebook is public and open to everybody, so you don't even have to be friends with me, because my friends thing filled up pretty quick. But you're welcome to come on and watch it. Just come on and say hi. And usually about the first hour and a half, we're talking really good recovery issues, not just substance abuse either. Things like toxic relationships or gambling addiction or other types of just tough situations that people have been through and found their way out and found redemption. Those are the types of stories we talk about on Road to Recovery. And it's a very inspirational podcast, we try to be. And I love just getting on there and having conversations just like this and having a conversation with different people and talking about important issues.
Great. What a great resource. So happy to have you here, and happy to have you here locally as your family's here now too. And I want to thank you for such a great interview and for sharing your story, Mike. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in to Table Talk again this week. We hope you have a healthy, happy, and safe week, and we invite you here again next week for more Table Talk.